Yvon Chouinard detests business, but he's a very successful businessman all the same. He's the owner and president of the sportswear giant Patagonia, which he describes as my resource to do something good. Chouinard's father was an impoverished French-Canadian mechanic who moved his family to Los Angeles in 1946. As a teenager, Yvon became a falconer, which led him into rock climbing, which led him into equipment manufacturing, which led him into outdoor apparel. Today, Patagonia is an enormously successful global company, and Yvon Chouinard is a new kind of businessman who believes, he says, that the accepted model of capitalism that necessitates endless growth and deserves the blame for the destruction of nature must be replaced. Patagonia has a wildlife rescue facility at its headquarters, donates 10% of its pre-tax profits to environmental causes, and gives 2-month paid leaves to employees who want to work full-time for environmental organizations. And that's only the beginning. Yvon Chouinard believes that the key to success is to hire excellent people and then let them run the company. This leaves him free to pursue what he calls his MBA, Management by Absence, traveling the world, speaking to environmental causes, and challenging business to reinvent itself. I want to start with a quote by Yvon Chouinard, which was, "If you want to understand the entrepreneur, study the juvenile delinquent." What lies behind that insight?
Well, you know, I think, like I wrote in my book, the juvenile delinquent, you know, he basically says that this sucks, I'm going to do it my own way. And some of the most successful businessmen I know have done it their own way and kind of broken the paradigm. And because, you know, when you're trying to start a business, you want to do something that no one else is doing. I mean, why try to compete against existing businesses? And it takes the juvenile delinquent to have the creativity and the will to go against everything that people say you have to do. And like in my company, we hire, I have 1,200 employees worldwide. I probably have 2 or 3 with MBAs. I was always a craftsman. My father was a craftsman. My father was born in Quebec, started working at 12 years old, walked over the border into Maine and started working in a mill at 10 years old, actually, 10 years old. But he became a tradesman and could build an entire house by himself. So I kind of inherited those genes, I think, and so I'm an innovator, not an inventor, but I look at products, whether it's a tablespoon or whatever it is, and I can say, that thing's ugly, I could make a better one of those. And so when I was young, I was a mountain climber, and I looked at all the tools for mountain climbing, and they were all really rough and didn't work very well, and they were made real cheaply, and so I thought, I can do better than this. That's how I started out in business. So that's been the story of my business, is just taking existing product, whether it's a dress or whatever, and making it better.
You were actually quite hostile to business. And I suspect are quite hostile to business in a broad sense, right?
I'm a child of the 60s and stuff. I mean, in the 60s, you were against everything. You're against the military-industrial complex, you're against your parents, you're against, you know, everything going on in society. So it's rebelling. And so a lot of those qualities I still have in me.
But you came to believe that business was really the source of the major environmental problems, right? That we needed to, well, capitalism in any case, needed to be upended and replaced. Right?
Yeah, eventually. Yeah, I saw that as, I mean, I've had several times in my life when I woke up and I realized I was part of the problem and that I should do something about that so that I became part of the solution rather than the problem. And the first time was when I was, you know, blacksmithing pitons, and we started making hard steel pitons because they could be used over and over again. And in America, we were coming from, reading Thoreau and Emerson and John Muir and the great naturists in America, and we felt like you shouldn't leave anything behind. Go into the wilderness, but leave nothing behind. Whereas the Europeans, their attitude was conquer the mountains and then make them easier for the next party. So they would make as cheap of pitons as they possibly could and then drive them into the rock and leave them there so that the next party would have an easier experience. And, it was manifest destiny, kind of. And we thought that was wrong, that you should go into the wilderness and find no trace of having been there of anybody else. So I made pitons out of hard steel that could be put in and taken out easily. But, with every technology, there's an unintended consequence. Every single one. I've never seen an instance where there isn't. And when there got to be so many climbers putting in these pitons and taking them out, it was destroying the cracks. It was making, a little crack this big suddenly was this big. And it was destroying the rock. And so I thought, I'm responsible for this, so I should do something about it. So then we came up with a different method of protection for climbing, where you take little aluminum chocks and just put them in with your fingers, pull them down, and they, in a little wedge in a crack, and turns out they were just as safe as pitons. But then try to convince people who are, pounding these pitons in with a 20-ounce hammer that they should rely on this with their lives. So then, I've always felt the only way to lead is by example. So myself and another guy went and climbed a multi-day route on El Capitan and Yosemite using no hammers, just putting these little things in to show the world that you could get by with this. And so that was my first real experience in seeing that I was the cause and that maybe I was also the solution.
Mm-hmm. And that is, and the other thing that strikes me about that story is that you started out making products that people relied on for their lives. And that's got to have something to do with your firm insistence that quality is at the top of your list of priorities.
Yeah, I think a lot of the problems that we're having as a society, as being an unsustainable society, I think can be solved through quality. When you're talking about employing people, technology is not going to employ people. It's going to destroy jobs. The more technology we have, the more robots we have, whatever it is, automated machines, it puts people out of work. And doesn't necessarily make the best product. And take agriculture, for instance. This industrial agriculture is feeding more people in the short term, but in the long term it's destroying millions of acres of cropland, it's polluting our planet, it's giving us food that is not as nutritious. And I think the solution in a lot of cases is what David Brower says, turn around and take a forward step. In other words, go back to labor-intensive organic agriculture, which employs people in meaningful work. I mean, I would much rather be picking fruit in an orchard than working at a computer all day myself. And so I think, for me, that's whenever I'm stuck with a business problem, the answer is always quality. Increase the quality, as opposed to a lot of businesses say, our profits are down this year, decrease the quality, decrease the service, have our customer service move to India, put less people on the phone and have a longer waiting period, whatever it is. It's always decrease the quality. For me, the answer has been to increase the quality, and I think if we want to employ people in the world, we have to consume less, but consume better. In other words, make products that last a long time. They're multifunctional. One little part breaks down, you can repair it instead of throw the whole piece away, which is, you know, all electronics now. You can't repair any of that stuff. Yeah, I notice how they repair cars now. They take out entire units, throw them away, and put another unit in instead of repairing the unit. So, I mean, I could go on forever about quality, but I think that's the key to changing our society. I had a house built recently out of all recycled materials. We built it out of broken up sidewalks, actually. 28-inch thick walls. I never have to heat it, never have to cool it. It's like living in a cave. It's sort of ambient temperature that's comfortable, and it's built to last 200 years. And it costs more to build it, but it won't, you know, you won't have to tear it down in 50 years and build another one and then another one.
Yeah, yeah. And there's no real reason that it shouldn't last more than 200 years either if people, you know, if people maintain it as the years go by. Right?
Yeah, I mean, look at the old brewery over here where we have our Patagonia store. That thing was built, what, 18th century? So it's still standing, built out of rock, and that's fantastic, I think.
No reason you can't keep on forever. You talk about Patagonia. At one point you say that you think of Patagonia as an ecosystem with its vendors and customers as an integral part of that system. That's a very different vision of a corporate structure. Right? But tell me how that works.
Well, I mean, I can say that our customers are very important to us because we do very little advertising, and so we rely on word of mouth from one customer telling another person about Patagonia. You know, on advertising, we spend 0.5% of sales on advertising. That's all, and so we feel like our customers are our friends, and then in our catalogs and stuff, we publish essays on trying to influence them to do the right thing as far as the environment goes. And what we're trying to do as a company is cause the least amount of harm in running a business. And in doing so, we want to influence other companies. So our mission statement is, you know, make the best product. So there's the quality part of it. Cause the least amount of harm. And that's the unintended consequences. In other words, educate ourselves so that we know what we're doing. And so we're not causing harm unintentionally or just through ignorance. And the last part is to use business to inspire and implement solutions to the environmental crisis. So that's the reasons why we're in business. And to do that, all of those things, is we have to make the best product, we have to cause the least amount of harm. Then the other part, the Zen master would say, the other part's going to happen. We are going to influence other companies. And in fact, we are. During the recession, this last recession, we grew 20, 25%, 30% every year, which is unusual for us. Normally we only grow very sustainably at 3 to 5%. Because I don't want to have I want to be independent of the banks. So we've always grown very slowly. But in the recession, the demand for our goods shot up like crazy. Because in a recession, people become very conservative. They don't buy, things just because they're bored. They'll buy things they need, and they'll buy better quality. They'll last a long time. They'll buy a piece of clothing that's multifunctional. They'll buy a ski jacket that you can ski in, you can mountain climb in, you can put it over your suit in a city in a rainstorm. They won't buy a specific ski jacket that sits in your closet 10 months a year. So that's kind of the clothes that we make. And so it's kind of a holistic approach to business where you're taking care of the damage that you do as much as you can, and you're involving your customer, and your customer is your best salesperson. And it all works so well that other companies are saying, what's going on with this Patagonia? I mean, look at them. They're a very successful company. They grew in a strong recession. Maybe we better think about doing some of the things that they're doing. So the last part of our mission statement is actually happening, where we are influenced in saying other companies and governments as well. A few years ago, Walmart called us. I mean, Walmart's the 11th largest economy in the world. There's only 10 countries larger than the Walmart company. And they called us and said, we want to send some people out to see your company. So they sent, I don't know, 7 or 9 people out, executives, to study what we were doing, because they had a mandate from the Walton family to green Walmart. And so they visited us, and we showed them around, and so that was the end of it, I thought. But then they called me about a year later and wanted me to come to Bentonville, Arkansas, to give a talk to 1,200 of their buyers for the company. And it was a little conference for their buyers where they were going to announce that part of the buyers' jobs from now on is to buy greener products and work only with suppliers that are willing to work on making their product more sustainable. And so I gave a talk there. And one thing led to another, and then Walmart sent a letter out to, 50 of the largest clothing companies in the world, and said, come to New York and talk about doing a sustainability index for clothing. Like, it's kind of like organic standards for food or something. Nobody came, not one. I mean, Walmart's got this terrible reputation. So Walmart came to us and said, would you co-sign a letter signed by Walmart and Patagonia to come to this conference? And so we did. Everybody came. So I thought, oh my God, this little David and Goliath thing, I always thought we were David, but now we're Goliath. So we started this sustainability index with, now we have about 50 companies that represent over 30% of the entire clothing and footwear sales in the world. These are all gigantic companies. And we're working on a sustainability index, which means, in brief, a couple of years from now, a customer can go into a department store and look at 5 brands of jeans on the table. And they can zap the barcode with whatever electronic gizmo they'll have a couple of years from now. And it'll tell them the whole history of those jeans. Where they're made, whether it's a sweatshop, whether it's a responsible sewing factory, the fibers used in the jeans, whether they're organic cotton or non-organic cotton, whether they're polyester, whatever, it's going to have a rating, and that's the sustainability index. It'll have a rating on how responsibly those jeans were made, each pair. So now the customer, the consumer, now has a choice between buying responsibly or less responsibly. I mean, jeans are jeans, pretty much. And so what it does, it suddenly gives power to consumers. Because, when we talked about corporations causing all this damage in the world, well, why do they do that? It's because we're demanding them to do that. We're demanding Canada exploit the tar sands because we want cheap petroleum. And the government calls us consumers. We're not citizens, we're consumers. The stock market goes up and down according to how confident we are. And so, but citizens have a lot of power. I mean, you look at this Arab Spring. These are citizens taking down governments. They can take down governments, they can create governments. In fact, I believe that civil democracy is the strongest force in society. That's where everything happens. But as consumers, we're the problem. And because, you look in Webster's, under consumer, it's one who uses up, who destroys. That's us. And so the Zen master would say, if you want to change government, don't focus on changing government. We're not going to change government. Focus on changing the corporations, because government is just a pawn of the corporations. But if you want to change the corporations, you got to change the consumers, and that's us. We're the problem. So if we can change, if we can make intelligent decisions on our purchasing, and if we can get into the habit of purchasing less, but purchasing better quality, we can change the corporations, and then government has to follow.
Isn't that where the Walmart thing starts? Was it consumer demand that made Walmart say we want to green our company?
No,
or?
I think it's the Walton family. Just sent it direct. They still own 40% of the stock or something, and they decided that they. Well, first of all, they saw profits in less packaging. They saw profits in turning all their trucks into more efficient engines, and so everything they did in the beginning was more profitable for them. They started recycling plastic, and which they normally only threw away, all their plastic packaging. Now they make millions of dollars in recycling the plastic. And if I was going to describe Walmart to somebody, Walmart would go to Crest toothpaste and say, get rid of the box. It does nothing. Consumer gets home, throws the box away, and it costs you more for that box. Figure it out. Yeah, okay, your toothpaste is going to roll off the shelf the way it's made now, but figure out a different. And when you figure it out, you're going to save money, and Walmart wants the savings.
Okay.
That's Walmart.
Okay. Not just a share of the savings.
But this sustainability index we're creating can be modified slightly to be used for buying a lawnmower. It can be used for buying stocks, because what it does, it forces transparency all through the entire supply chain. So now when you buy a stock in a company, you have no idea what's going on in that company. Look how many smart people bought Enron stock. You have no idea. But you can read their corporate sustainability reports, and all it does, it tells you that they gave a few $1,000s to the symphony, and they eliminated some packaging, but in reality they really did it to save money. They don't talk about all the millions of acres of the Niger Delta that they're destroying, or how many lawsuits they have because of pollution, and they don't say any of that stuff. So you don't know what's going on in a company. But I think if we can have full transparency in corporations, it'll change the world. It really will. Because I think the consumer, in the end, given enough information, will make the right decisions. I really do. The big difference, we are a corporation, but we're not a public corporation. And in fact, Robert Reich has written a book called Super Capitalism. He has 2 chapters that basically says why public corporations can never be responsible, period. Their sole mandate is to maximize profits for the shareholders, and they can't give their attitude is give the shareholders the profits and then let them, if they want to give their money to charity or whatever, let them do it. But It shouldn't happen at the corporate level. And I'm saying that's wrong. And being a private corporation, I can do whatever I want. I don't have to answer to stockholders. I don't have to. So it gives. I have a lot more power as the owner of a little small corporation than the president of General Motors. Yeah, we've been out of debt for several years, and I don't want to have to deal with bankers. I don't want to have bankers. The deeper you go into debt with the bank, the more they tell you what to do. And so to do what I'm doing, to be a free man, basically, and do whatever I want with the company, it has to remain private. You know, there's only 4,000 public companies in the United States.
Really?
I had no idea how few there were.
No, nor I.
And, you know, the whole Wall Street world revolves around these 4,000 companies. It's amazing. And yet all these little private companies are really the backbone of the country.
Every aspect of Patagonia follows that same set of values, right? Tell me a little bit about what it's like for somebody to work at Patagonia and who the people are that you hire, because I think that's a big piece of this too, isn't it?
The title of my first book, which is Let My People Go Surfing, it means that our corporate headquarters are within walking distance of some surfing beaches in California. So I've always been involved in a lot of different sports, and basically when there's a lot of powder snow comes during the night, you should be allowed to just go and ski powder, no matter whether you have a job or not. And for us, if you want to be a serious surfer, you don't go surfing next Thursday at 2 o'clock. You go when the surf comes up. So you have to have a job that allows you to do that. And so we've always had that philosophy. And so it means that for that to work, you have to hire very independent, self-motivated people. And then you leave them alone. And so, like I've been on the road a lot fishing this whole summer, and I haven't called back to the company once. No, even if the place burns down, why call me? You know what to do. And so I had a psychologist come and this is years ago, do a study of our people at Patagonia. He said, look, I gotta tell you, these are the most independent people I've ever seen in a company. They're so independent, they're actually unemployable. Because they're, to get them to work in a team, you have to build consensus. It's kind of like the Native Americans. The chief of the tribe was not the richest person in the tribe. He was the best orator. And they would sit down and his job was to build consensus within the tribe. And I can't say that that's my job, but that's the CEO's job, really. Because to get a lot of independent people working together, they all have to believe that it's the right thing to do. And once they see a particular direction, and they're all going in one direction, things get done. I mean, look at the United States right now. We got all these blue states and red states. We're never going to agree on anything. The best we can ever come up with is a compromise, where we cut the baby in half, that Solomon story. And compromise doesn't solve the problem. It's neither here nor there. There's a right way, there's a wrong way. There's no gray way to solve a problem. So we get all these independent people all going in one direction, and then I leave them alone. And it works phenomenally well. But I've had companies come in to study what we're doing, and they see this Let My People Go Surfing policy, which means you want to work at home one day because your kid is sick? Fine, go work at home. I don't care. All I care is the work gets done. And they think, oh, that's a great idea. Let's do that. I say, forget it. You can't do it. it's not going to work. You can't have an existing company suddenly change over to that. You have to begin with the very first person you hire. Otherwise, you get people that will take advantage of that policy. And if they don't feel like they're truly part of the company, and they're working there for the right reasons, they'll abuse it. They'll go to the hairdresser instead of going surfing or taking care of their sick child.
Yeah. And in order to keep these highly individual people, you also offer a whole range of things that no other company would, that I can think of, would imagine. I mean, you've got a Raptor rescue operation within the company. Tell me about that.
Yeah, we bring in injured raptors. We bring in over 1,000 a year. We have a little facility that I have employees volunteer to kill rats and feed them to the raptors, and we have to raise mice and rats to feed them, and we have a veterinarian that does pro bono work for us. We'll reset wings, and then we release the birds back into the wild. I mean, that's just one of the things that I used to be the rat killer, actually. When we first started out, the women wouldn't kill the rats. So they used to call me every couple of days, and I'd go over and kill rats. But now these women grab a rat by the tail and whap it on.
That takes you back to the beginning, doesn't it? Because one of the places that you started getting involved with the mountains was when you started getting involved with falconry as a very young boy, right? Yeah.
Yeah, falconry was a very important lesson for me. I've kind of been a student of Zen philosophy all my life, where you basically work on the process and the solution will just come along. Or, in business, if you ask me what our profits were last year or what they're going to be this year, you know what? I have no idea. And I couldn't care less. I just know that the process is growing well for us this year, and we will be profitable. Instead of focusing on the process, instead of focusing on the end product, the profits, what you'll do is you'll compromise your way. And so when we first wanted to put in a child care center, we were only one in, I think there was 150 in the United States, corporate child care centers. And I had 70-something% women working there, and I didn't want to lose them. So my wife came up with the idea of putting in a child care center. Well, the accountants are going to tell you that, oh, no, you can't do that. This is a huge drain on the company. Your profits will go down, blah, blah, blah. They don't see the externalities of what's going on there. The fact that to get a new employee often costs you $50,000 in headhunter costs, training, inefficiencies in the beginning. And so it turns out that having a child care center is a profit center. And but that's something they don't teach you in business school.
Right. But a profit center because essentially it allows you to keep the best employees and for them to be as productive as possible because they're not worried about their kids. Their kids are right there where they can see them.
Yeah. We not only have a child care center, we have an after-school program where we send a van out and pick up kids at school and bring them back to the company, and then they have a play yard where they hang out until their parents get out of work at 5 o'clock.
And there's something good about kids seeing his parent at work.
Oh, these kids that come out of our child care center are the best product we produce. They're unbelievable. Normally, you see a kid that's been raised at home by a mother who's been fired because she's pregnant, and she plugs him into the television all day, and you see the kid and the mother, and you say hello to the kid, and he hides behind the mother's skirt. Our kids, you walk in there and you say, hi kids, they'll go over and shake hands with you. They've been raised by the village, and they're they're so confident. It's incredible, and and they have a sense of reality about them that is very unusual. I walked into our child care center one day a few years ago, and I said, "Hi guys, how's school coming?" And they said, "We're not at school. We're at work. My parents work over there. We work over here." That was pretty amazing for me to see that.
It's a wonderful outcome, and they have a relationship with work. They know what it is. They know what it involves. They think it can be agreeable, interesting. Right?
They go and they force their parents to recycle things. I mean, they're teaching their parents in a lot of cases, and they've been handled by many different people, and they're ready to join society. And when they go to a school afterwards, public school, the teachers all say they're the best kids in class.
Well, I think when you say raised by the village, boy, that rings a bell with me, because I lived for 35 years in a village and saw how that actually works. Raised a kid in a village, and he would come in when he was 4, he'd be out wandering, and he'd come into the boat shop where we were building a boat, and we'd say, "You want some lunch?" He'd say, "No, thanks, I ate at Mary's." And he had this sense of the community as being kind of like a whole environment for him, In a way, Patagonia is kind of like a village, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. We're one giant village, yeah. In fact, and this follows suit to our customers. I had a friend, this woman, who was driving through Rock Springs, Wyoming. Rock Springs is an oil town. Very rough, a lot of drunks, a lot of drugs, a lot of violent crime, and she was in a very bad neighborhood and her car broke down 11 o'clock at night. She was scared to death, didn't know what to do. Saw a person walking by with a Patagonia jacket. She went over to that person and found a like-minded friend who helped her out in every way, and I mean, that's what she looked for. She looked, for somebody wearing a Patagonia jacket.
Isn't that interesting? It's a badge of a certain kind of set of values that you can trust.
Yeah, we don't have those jackets on bad people.
I don't think that's an idea that would occur to most CEOs.
Somebody reminded me the other day that when they caught the Unabomber, he was wearing a Patagonia Hawaiian shirt.
Maybe this is not 100% true. Another astonishing policy for me was that you provide, well, number one, you provide a whole range of classes in philosophies having to do with various aspects, both of life and of business, one of which is training in civil disobedience. And then if people have taken that, you allow them to go and take a 2-month leave of absence on full pay to work on environmental projects, and you'll even post bail for them if they do civil disobedience and get arrested?
That's right.
Tell me more about that. How often does that happen?
Well, our internship, you don't have to take the civil disobedience class to do one of these internships. But if you're going to do any civil disobedience acts, then if you do take that class and you do get caught, we'll pay your bail, get you out.
Now, you've mentioned thorough a couple of times, and clearly you believe that civil disobedience is not a bad thing.
Well, I mean, you can't tell me we have a just society where, we always make the right decisions for the best good of the people. I mean, we're being run by corporations. I mean, it's not a just society. It's, we've got scientists coming up with good science, and then you have the corporations hiring pay for hire scientists to say the opposite. You have a media that is so-called balanced, which means they don't hire any journalists anymore to do the footwork. What do you mean balanced? They're still, Well, if we're going to have if we're going to have an article on Darwin, then we have to give the same equal treatment to the to the opposite side.
Yeah, the creationists.
The creationists, and that's wrong. That's absolutely wrong. They're just not doing their homework, and so yeah, we don't have a just society, and that's when you need civil disobedience. Absolutely. I mean, you could look at the whole Arab Spring. Those are disobeying
People
the
who
government.
Should, yeah.
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 As it should be.
Yeah. It's an incredibly powerful tool. And
No, civil democracy is the most powerful tool going. If you look at the newspaper on a daily basis, you'll see any gains we're making as a society is done through civil democracy.
another thing that you said earlier on I wanted to come back to, which was the future of the clothing industry. And it seems to me that between the lines, I see your sense that ultimately clothing is something that you should buy, it should last a long time, and then you should be able to recycle it.
Yeah, you know, we just, I mean, we make dresses, and people could say, I mean, you make mountain climbing clothes and you make dresses, but you know, we treat making a dress the same way we treat a piece of mountain climbing clothes. We start our design process with all the principles of industrial design, where you have a need and you satisfy that need with you know, knowledge and resources, and we look at a dress and say, we don't want to just make dresses. We don't want to have anything you have to iron, number one. We want to make all our dresses so that you can wash them in a bucket, hang them up, and then wear them on the airplane the next day, without causing, you know, with causing the least amount of harm in making that dress. Because, you know, like, you can have stay press chino pants, and they're stay pressed because they've got all these chemicals put on, which usually it's formaldehyde, which is a very toxic chemical. That's what they use to control shrinkage and to make a pair of pants so you don't have to iron. We can't do that. We have to do that by construction of the fabric itself. Either use more yarn and weave it tighter, and then pre-shrink it and do different things.
What I pick up is between the lines of some of the things you've written is that your sense that at the end of the day you should be able to take that dress and basically remelt it and rebuild something new out of the old material.
Yeah, I mean,
it's cradle to cradle.
Yeah. Bill McDonough wrote a book, you know, about closing the circle on consuming, and that's what we're trying to do as a company. We're about 70% there right now in using recyclable fibers and recycled fibers. And what we're doing is we are accepting responsibility for our product from birth till birth. So we have our Common Threads program where we ask our customer to think twice about whether they really need that product from us, or are they just buying it because they're bored. Do they really need it? And if they don't need it, don't buy it. And we're asking them for that. In return, if they do buy it from us instead of somebody else, well, thanks for buying it from us. If it breaks down, we promise to repair it. And if it's a child's product and the child outgrows the thing, or you gained a bunch of weight and you can't wear it anymore, or you're just tired of it and you want to get rid of it, we'll help you sell it on eBay. We'll help you find another customer for it. We have a thing going with eBay that you can sell it, and you can pocket the money or you can give it to environmental causes. And in fact, the used Patagonia stuff often increases in value. The hottest thing with young teenage kids now is to wear their parents' old Patagonia stuff. It's the fashion thing. In Japan, there's entire stores that sell nothing but used Patagonia at ridiculously high prices. So it keeps its value. And then when the product is finally completely worn out, nobody can wear it, give it back to us. We still own that product mentally. And we promise that we'll recycle it into more product. Not park benches, but hopefully more clothing. And so what it does, it makes us use things like polyester, which can be melted down in its original polymer infinitely. It forces us to use nylon 6 instead of nylon 12, because nylon 6 can be recycled, nylon 12 can't. Forces us to try to go to a zipper company and tell them, look, we want those nylon teeth to be polyester, or nylon 6 instead of 12, so that we can recycle the whole jacket, so that we don't have to take it all apart. And so it changes the way we design things, but also, I don't want to see this stuff coming back. As a businessman, I don't want to, because it costs us money to deal with that, and I don't want to see it coming back. So it forces us to make a product that'll last forever, or almost forever, long enough so that they forget where it came from.
But if it does come back, it pays you back in a way too, because it's more raw material that you're getting without cost.
It is,
right?
but it's not.
But not very.
It's not profitable, but I mean, the idea of consuming and discarding, discarding endlessly, that's what our society is based on. Our whole economy is based on that. And we have to stop that, because there are limits. And we're reaching those limits in a lot of cases. And we have to close the loop on consuming. And not only that, but it's got me thinking about society as it's set up now can't go on for much longer. We really have hit a lot of limits. So what is the new society going to look like? And you know, part of the things I look at Europeans consume 75% less than we do here in America, Canada, and the U.S. 75% less. And what they do is they buy better quality, and they keep it for a long time. And that's what the new society has to start looking at. Has to be more like that.
Yeah. That long-term thing, I'm also struck by the way that that long-term thinking is just your whole set of philosophies. The written philosophies are just sort of soaked in that kind of thinking. One sentence that you wrote that I thought really resonated for me was, Patagonia makes products for a deeper, less distracted experience of the world. In order to tell our story, we need the customer's undivided attention. And I thought, you really are well, the first thing that struck me is that's exactly what we're doing here today. The green interviews are long and in depth, because we want the customer's undivided attention. We want the story to be told in the way it needs to be told. But it also strikes me that that's a mindful way of consuming and a mindful way of relating to the consumer, and that's a real change in exactly what you're talking about, isn't it?
Well, that's right. I firmly believe that most of the damage caused to our planet is caused unintentionally, and it's caused by just mindless consuming, not really looking into the ramifications of what you're doing, and we have to change that. There's no doubt about it. And you know, in a lot of consumer products, we will have choices. when it comes to buying gasoline, you have no choice. I mean, we're addicts. We're not going to go to an oil company and say, I'm not going to buy gasoline anymore. Well, it's like a dope addict going to this pusher and saying, I'm not going to buy dope from you anymore. Well, as long as you're an addict, you're going to continue demanding that product. And with oil companies, you don't have a choice. There'd be, 4 different brands of gasoline on a corner. You don't have a choice. You just pull into the cheapest one, or they're all the same price. And so, yeah, in that situation, the consumer has no power over those people. But on all products that we're not addicted to, we have a choice. And we can make intelligent choices. Particularly, that's why I say that sustainability index is so powerful. Incredibly powerful tool. I think it's the most important thing I've ever done as a company. And we're leading that whole program, our own people at Patagonia. And we're going to the European Union, who's also has been working on a sustainability index, but theirs is really weak. It's created by corporations that are not devoted to doing the right thing. So we're trying to convince them to adopt our sustainability index. And if that there's a good chance that that'll happen. It'll be much stronger than what they're coming up with. So, back to influencing governments, that could be a real revolution.
Yeah. You talked about the new world that's coming, and it's coming out of all of these kinds of things. Actually, when you were speaking about clothing, I was thinking about Ray Anderson and his notion of a lifetime lease, because you're almost at that point, aren't you? You're saying this product is our product from beginning to end.
That's right.
Right, and it follows that for me as a consumer, I'm in effect leasing from you, and then returning it to you at the end.
Yeah.
That's almost like the natural cycle of the natural world. You're starting to get an economy that resembles the world.
Well, take that even further. I mean, you have open pit mines. When they're done, they walk away. The tar sands, you think they're going to fix the tundra up there when they're done? Of course not. They're going to walk away from it. You build a dam, you walk away from it. Build a fish farm, you destroy an entire estuary, then you move over to another estuary. It's all the same thing. It's accepting responsibility for your product and what you do.
And right the
Forever.
way through. Yeah, forever. That's the key part, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, another area where Patagonia is leading a number of companies is the 1% for the Planet initiative. Right? Tell me about that.
Well, we can do whatever, as much as we can to cause the least amount of damage in making our product, but in the end, we're polluters. There's no such thing as sustainability in any society. It's creating a product, you always end up with more waste than the final product. And that's why I hate that word sustainability. And so I feel like we have to do our penance. And our penance is to take 1% of our sales, not profits, because profits can be hidden. You can give yourself a big bonus at the end of the year. And when I see a bottle of juice, fruit juice, that says a percentage of the sales of this product will be given to restoring the rainforest. What does that mean, a percentage? It doesn't mean anything unless they state what it is. Or they can say 10% of our profits go to doing this or that. Well, maybe there's no profits. 10% of nothing is nothing. 1% of sales is a hard number. And I don't look at it as charity. It's our cost of doing business. And we take that 1% and we give it to, at Patagonia, we give it to about 500 different environmental organizations. And so over the years, we've given over $40 million away. And then a few years ago, I started organization called 1% for the Planet. And now it's 1,500 companies, all devoted to giving 1% of their sales to environmental causes. So I think, when we talked about public corporations can never be responsible, I think at some point they may realize, when the consumers have a choice, that it's in their self-interest to be more responsible. And that little 1% logo on their product is important as a selling tool. So they may do good things as a marketing tool, which is fine, I don't care, as long as they do it. And so anyway, that 1% organization is all. There's no public companies. There are parts of public companies that are, a brand within a public company that's in there, but they're mostly private companies. And right now, we can't attract larger companies. I think Patagonia is probably still the largest company in there. And that kind of disturbed me, and I thought, why can't we attract larger companies to join 1%? And the answer came reading about philanthropy in America. It turns out that the poorest 10% of the American people give, on the average, 6% of their annual income away every year to charity. 6%. These are the poorest people. The richest 10% give, on the average, of 1.5%. So when you see these multi-billionaires giving away millions of dollars, it's chump change to them. Some of them make $5 million a day. And to give, 10 million here, 100 million there, that's nothing. They're still going to eat the same thing for breakfast. So the poorest people are the most charitable, and the smallest companies are also continue with that. So it's kind of interesting.
Yeah. You also have an unusual preference in who you give the money to, because you basically you're not giving it to kind of motherhood and pablum causes. You're giving it to much tougher initiatives.
Well, I give it to people promoting civil disobedience, basically. I try to give it to women some mothers who are opposing a toxic, dump in their neighborhood, or opposing a clear cut somewhere. They're real activist organizations, because I feel like our money goes a lot further with those organizations, the small grassroots activist organizations, rather than the big environmental worldwide organizations, which, they do good work too, but they get their money from conservative businessmen and stuff like that. They don't need our money.
Yeah, and in a sense, they have to kind of modify their behavior or keep their behavior within certain limits if they're going to attract money from those kinds of sources, right?
Yeah.
And you're the person that can give it to people who don't have to structure themselves that way.
Yeah, and like I said, we give to 500 organizations. I have 2 people running that whole program, and some volunteers from within Patagonia. So every 2 years, people fight to get on the committee to look over grants and stuff, our own employees, because it's really satisfying work. And then I have 2 people monitoring the whole thing, so the overhead is very, very low. Whereas I know of a big foundation that gives away, their overhead is $20 million a year to give away 40 grants. And the paperwork required to get a grant from that organization is like this thick. And because, you know why? They don't know what they're doing. They don't know what the issues are in America, where the money should go. We know we know every one of these little organizations that we give money to, and we know we don't need any backup information from them because we know it's going to do good work. And so it's a very simple process.
There's something tickling at my mind as we speak about the requirement for honesty and for courageous thinking in doing that kind of thing. In a certain sense, and like you're probably the most unflinching person I know in the business sphere in looking at the problems and telling the truth about it. You know, and my suspicion is that when you've got that kind of overhead, it's partly because you want to avoid really knowing what the real problems are, because that would have implications for you that you might not want to face. Does that strike you as resonating?
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're in this. You can have you can have the low overhead because you know precisely what you're doing, why you're doing it, and you're not scared of the consequences.
Yeah, and if you know, if we lose, if we give it to an organization and they blow it on something, it's a small risk. You know, it's no different than to let my people go surfing policy. We know which organizations to give to and why they need the money, and we give it to them and we leave them alone.
Yeah, and throughout the piece here, both as an employer and as a philanthropist and so forth, you're making very careful choices about the character of the people, and then not making and laying much restriction on them after that. Basically saying, you know what needs to be done, go do it.
Yeah.
Right? And, yeah. You could have sold the business. Well, no, actually, let me take another little one just before that. In order for society to move more in the other companies to move more in the directions that you've been leading in, what sorts of structural changes would we have to make?
I don't think we can. I think we just have to. When a public company well, what can I say? I think we have to go back to being a nation of small private companies. And like Robert Reich says, they can never be responsible, these public companies. And public companies are forced to grow 15% a year. Otherwise, their stock goes down. Their stock goes down. The CEO and all the principals in there see their retirement go down. And so all decisions are made on the short term. They're made to keep the stock price high, and it fuels endless growth. Grow, grow, grow. And you can't have endless growth. So you look at these companies, they grow like this, and then they die like this. And then it puts millions of people out of work. I mean, Hewlett-Packard used to be one of the most responsible companies. They just laid off, 4,500 people the other day or something. Because, you know, the profits took a little hit for one reason or another. So you use people as fodder, you know. You want more profits? Get rid of a bunch of people. They're not important. And that's the way public companies work. And I don't think we can change that. I think when a public company is abusing its charter, take it away from them. And that's never happened, but it's in the law that you should be able to do that. Just take it away from them.
I've often wondered about that too. If a company behaves egregiously, you know, a person can suffer penalties up to and including death, but the corporation doesn't, right? Doesn't. Maybe pays a fine. The fine is usually trivial in comparison with the size of the company.
Yeah.
But
nobody goes to jail.
No, and there's never the death penalty, which is in effect what you're calling for criminal companies, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's also going to have to come from us, isn't it? That's not going to come from...
Government's not going to do that.
No,
No, it has to come from civil democracy.
Yeah.
We're going to have to be the ones that demand that.
You mentioned a moment ago about retirement. that for the executives in public companies, that when the profits take a hit, they see their retirement taking a hit too. You're not retiring, as far as I can figure out. You have no intention of retiring.
I'm going to die in the saddle, that's for sure.
Now, you could have, years ago, sold the company, accumulated taken a large fortune away with you, and spent the rest of your life, surfing, climbing, and giving the money away. Why did you choose not to do that?
Well, I feel like, all of us have a responsibility to do something for the common good, and to be able to sleep at night. So, I mean, you're a writer, you're a speaker, you're making films. You're doing exactly, using the resources that you have to do good. And the resources that I have is this company. That is a relatively small company in the scheme of things, but has this tremendous power to change, I hate to be bragging, but change society and to change larger companies and lead by example. And if I sold it, the way the laws are written, in the end you have to sell to the highest bidder, which would be turn it public. And once I become a public company, I'm part of the problem as far as I'm concerned. However, that's changed in California recently, because we were the first company to become a B corporation, which is a benefit corporation, which means that you can set up stipulations just like a conservancy or a land trust can do. Like a farmer can take his land and put it into a land trust thing where it can never be developed. It can only have 2 houses on it, and the fields always have to be farmed and forever. And so we started this thing now called a B corporation, that we can say in our charter, our corporate charter, this is the way our company has to continue forever. And so there's a chance that it'll never become a public corporation. Not that I'm trying to set up a legacy or anything. I'm such a pessimist. I fully expect the whole world economy to fall any day now. But at least it can never be sold to the wrong people after we're long gone and everything. And anyway, we were the first company in California to adopt that.
Which is this, I'm tremendously glad that you developed this tool and have been using it the way you have been, and it's really good to know that it isn't, because I think that's often the weakness with these things, that when the founder goes, the initiative dissolves, and maybe you're able to keep this for a while.
Well, I think it's all the way through our entire company. Yeah, that's the important part, and tell you the truth, I'm doing exactly what I would have done had I sold the company. I mean, I just I've just been fishing since the end of May, and by delegating to the right people. I mean, you delegate to the wrong people, that's where your company goes down. You delegate to the right people and leave them alone, and it all works out.
Yvon Chouinard, the extraordinary owner of the Patagonia sportswear company, who sees his business as a tool with which to serve the environment. If you enjoyed this conversation, you may also want to see our interview with Andrew Heinzman, who heads Canada's first environmentally oriented investment company, or James Hogan, who uses his public relations expertise to unmask the spin doctors of climate change denial. For The Green Interview, I'm Silver Donald Cameron. See you next time.